Hello, my name is Mary Costa. I'm 75 years old. I was born in Vallejo, California in 1946. I was delivered by a midwife, and I stayed in California. My parents stayed in California till after the war, and then they returned to Hartford, Connecticut, where I spent my early years. I had a brother that was 18 months younger than I was, and we were raised in a very cultural neighborhood where there were a lot of Italian people, Jewish people, and mixed. It was a mixed neighborhood. I went to public school until I was in high school. My childhood was uneventful. For the most part, I did what most children do, is play ball and games and so on. When I was 5 years old, I had a ruptured appendicitis and ended up in the hospital, where I was gravely ill for a while, but I came out of it. I survived it. My father was born in this country but raised in Portugal. He was very cultural. My mother was born in this country, but also born in a very Portuguese culture, where she told me she couldn't speak English when she went to school, even though she was born in this country. My father was very strict, but it didn't affect me until my early teens, where he would not allow me to do things that most of the kids were doing, like going to early dances and things like that. He was very strict. My mother was the savior through all this, because she allowed my brother and I to do the things that most kids did that were absolutely normal. She was my best friend until the day she died. Okay. I went to a private Catholic girls' school in West Hartford, which I did not want to go to. I wanted to go to the public school with all my friends. But my father said to me, "Oh, you're just afraid you won't pass the test." I said, "I'll pass the test." And I took the test, and he goes, "Now you're going." So I really did not like the idea, but once I got there, it was hard for me because the nuns were strict. I wasn't used to the discipline of the Catholic school, so I had a hard time, especially my freshman year. But I eventually came to really love the school. Growing up, I was the good kid. My brother was a little devil. He was always into everything. He was always getting into trouble. And my father was always punishing him, lecturing him. But like I said, I was the good kid. In reality, a lot of what I did behind the scenes was just as bad as my brother, but my father never found out. I always wanted to be a nurse, so I became a nurse's aide at 16 and worked at St. Francis Hospital and worked there for a number of years, and then I went to school to be an LPN and graduated and went to work at St. Mary's Infirmary in West Hartford. After I got out of nursing school, I applied to the 3 hospitals in Hartford, St. Francis, Hartford Hospital, and Mount Sinai, and all they were offering new grads was 3 to 11 shift with rotation to nights and every 3rd weekend off. My future mother-in-law indicated that St. Mary's in West Hartford had opened up an infirmary, and they were offering straight days, every other weekend off. And I told her, I said, "I don't want to work in a convalescent home." She goes, "It's not a convalescent home. It's a infirmary where they keep patients, where they send their patients before the hospital." So I thought, all right, so I tried it. And I ended up loving working with geriatrics. I became a head nurse. I ran a floor of mostly male patients. And then I developed a manual for nurses' aides for training. And the state came in and said I couldn't run it because I was an LPN and it had to be an RN. So at that time, I got a letter from a place called the Hartford Dispensary asking if I was interested in working with behavioral health clients. And I knew right away what she meant. It was with heroin addicts. So I thought to myself, how did they get my name? So I took advantage of the interview, and I went to the interview and I said to her, how did you get my name? And she said, you must have applied to public health nursing at one time, and we got your name from their roster. So it was a freak thing. I took the job, and I didn't talk for 6 months. I was so intimidated by the staff more than the clients. We didn't call them patients, we called them clients. But like I said, the staff scared the blazes out of me. Anyway, I survived, and I became a staff nurse, a head nurse, clinic supervisor. Then I went back to school and got my RN. And while I was working at St. Vincent's Hospital, acute psychiatric ward, I got a call from my former boss. And he said to me, what are you doing with the rest of your life? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I wonder if you're interested in becoming Director of Treatment Services for the Hartford Dispensary. So I was talking to one of my instructors, and I said, I really wanted to stay in the city for a little longer as a working person. And to be very blunt, she said to me, don't be an idiot. She said, you go home and take that job. You'll never get that kind of job here. The competition's too tough. So I did, and I never regretted it. So I became Director of Treatment Services for the Hartford Dispensary, and which ended up, initially they had 400 clients, and then they, with 2 clinics, and then they added a clinic in the suburbs in Manchester, New London, or Norwich, and Manchester. And so it was a good job. I met my first husband in the late 60s. We married in 1970, and my first husband was from a very Irish Catholic family with 5 children. I loved their family. It was such a cohesive family, and I learned how to love camping. And we had a good relationship. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long, and after 4 years, we separated and divorced. I really felt like I would be single for the rest of my life. I ended up going back to school to a program in New York City for LPNs to become RNs in 1 year. So I packed my bag, saved my money, and off to New York I went. It was difficult. It was like I had to open up my brain, and hopefully whatever information I learned stayed there. I made some really good friends while I was there, and I really wanted to live in the city after graduating as a working person. However, my former boss from the Hartford Dispensary called me up, and he called me up on the floor that I was working in, which was a acute psychotic ward in St. Vincent's Hospital in Greenwich Village. And he said to me, what are you doing with the rest of your life? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I want to know if you'll take a position as Director of Treatment Services at the Hartford Dispensary. So I talked to one of my professors, and she said very bluntly, "Don't be an idiot. You go home and take that job. You'll never get anything like that in New York because the competition is too tough." So back home I went and became Director of Treatment Services for the Hartford Dispensary, which eventually they started with 2 clinics, and they eventually had 4 and 6 clinics with well over 1,000 patients. I met my second husband at the Hartford Dispensary. We got together, and it was knowing his background. He came from a tough background. It was I never thought we would ever last. But one day he said to me, "Mary," he said, "I want somebody in my life, and I want it to be you. And if it can't be you, it's going to be somebody else." And so my girlfriend said, "He threatened you?" I said, "No, he just very simply said, I want to have somebody in my life." So we lived together. We rented a condo. We lived together. And then one day we got married. And we were married for 11 years. He had 3 adult children. And his middle daughter, Sherry, had a son, which was the first grandchild, which we took care of on weekends because she had a weekend job. And he became the child I never had. And I enjoyed it immensely. He was a funny kid. And he gave me my next nickname, which was Hottie. And I didn't know what I wanted him to call me because he had 2 natural grandmothers. So a friend of mine, actually it was the doctor at the Hartford Dispensary, she was the step grandmother. She goes, "Don't worry, they'll come up with a name for you." And sure enough, it was Hottie. And why it was Hottie, I have no idea. He was a little boy and he wanted to go out on the deck. And he kept going, "Out, out." And I said, I was trying to ignore him because I wasn't quite ready to put him out there. And then he just bellowed, "Hottie, out, out, Hottie." Hottie became my grandma, and all the grandchildren call me Hottie. My second husband, Gerald, and I were married for 11 years. They were good years. He once said to me, "You live well with me." And I said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "Because you don't pay any attention to me." He was kind of grumpy all the time, and he would say to me, "Mary, would you get this done?" I said, "Yes, I will." And he once said to me, "You're not going to do it." He said, "You just pay me lip service. You never do anything I want you to do." I said, "I would never do that." And he goes, "Yes, you do." Anyway, we live well together. Unfortunately, he developed lung cancer and went through chemotherapy and was in treatment for 6 months and became very ill. And I took care of him, and he died. And I miss him to this very day. Most of the years of our marriage, I worked for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. I left the Hartford Dispensary and went to the state and became a drug and alcohol program inspector, where I worked until my retirement. During the time I was dating my second husband, I developed a cerebral aneurysm, which I was operated on and miraculously survived, but was out of commission for a long time. When I returned to work at the Hartford Dispensary, my current executive director had resigned, and there was a new executive director there that I was now working under. I eventually left the Hartford Dispensary and went to work for the state of Connecticut as a behavioral health specialist. And actually, my role was to become a program inspector for drug and alcohol programs. I stayed with the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services until 2003, and then I retired. And the department gave me a grand send-off. And everybody said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "I have no idea what I'm going to do now." "Oh, you got to do something." I said, "Oh, I will. I just don't know what it is." And so I've been retired now since 2003, I think. On December 7, 2020, I was out grocery shopping and I developed severe abdominal pain. It got so bad that I went home, laid on the couch, and the pain persisted. I got up and just about passed out, so I knew there was something more significant, and went and sat on my front porch, dialed 911, and was taken to the hospital, where I was diagnosed with a perforated bowel. I don't remember the hospital, but I had surgery and was put on antibiotics and was eventually transferred to Apple Rehab in Haddam, Connecticut. They treated me well there, and I continued with the antibiotics. But once I became ambulatory, I was bored out of my mind. And my niece, Christina, who's been my guardian angel, found Saybrook at Haddam, and I was transferred here and have been living here ever since. This place has been wonderful. I feel like I'm living in a resort. There's so much more activities, and I'm on the resident council, and the grounds are gorgeous. I'm just enjoying life. I haven't done anything constructive. I've discovered my public library, and I go there quite a bit and take advantage of their programs and opportunities. And I'm not sure what my future is going to bring at this moment in time, but I'll decide that. And like Scarlett O'Hara said, I'll think about that tomorrow.